The council chamber was an awe-inspiring structure, suspended within the nebula core, a vibrant, swirling mass of cosmic energy that had fascinated scientists for millennia. The chamber itself was a grand, circular room, with seats arranged in tiers, each one occupied by a representative of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The ceilings were high, arched, and shimmering with the light of distant stars, while the walls were adorned with symbols representing the unity and diversity of the species that formed the Galactic Council. But today, that unity was threatened. A dark cloud of uncertainty hung over the room, the tension palpable as representatives argued, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and frustration. "The Zeltraxians are unlike any enemy we've ever faced," bellowed Ralcor, a hulking reptilian warrior from the Gorgax Dominion. His deep-set eyes glowed with a fierce intensity. "They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. Their only goal is total domination." A slender, ethereal figure from the Valora Alliance, a species known for their diplomatic prowess, interjected, "Perhaps we can still find a way to communicate. We must exhaust all options before resorting to violence." But the notion was quickly dismissed by the representative of the Litherians, a race of highly advanced artificial intelligences. "The Zeltraxians are a species of pure logic, devoid of emotion. They have analyzed every possible outcome and concluded that conquest is their optimal strategy. Diplomacy is futile." The chamber fell into a tense silence as the implications sank in. For eons, the Galactic Council had maintained peace through careful negotiation, avoiding large-scale wars. The idea of engaging in a conflict of this magnitude was almost unthinkable. It was then that Captain Aria Kane, the representative of the Terran Alliance, stood up. Her uniform, a blend of form and function, bore the insignia of humanity's space forces, a stylized eagle clutching a globe. Her presence commanded attention, even among the diverse array of beings in the room. "Members of the Council," she began, her voice steady and firm, "I understand your reluctance to go to war, but the Zeltraxians are a threat that cannot be reasoned with or ignored. They will not stop until they have consumed everything in their path." Her words were met with a mixture of fear and skepticism. Humanity, though young in the grand scheme of the galaxy, had quickly earned a reputation for its unpredictable nature. They were seen as a species of contradictions, capable of great compassion but also of extreme violence, innovative yet reckless, courageous yet foolhardy. "And what do you propose, Captain Kane?" asked the Litherian representative, his voice resonating with synthetic calmness. "What can humanity offer that the rest of us cannot?" Kane's gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. "What we offer," she said slowly, "is our willingness to do whatever it takes to win. We don't just fight wars, we survive them. We adapt, we innovate, and we strike fear into the hearts of our enemies. You may call us crazy, and perhaps we are, but that insanity is what has kept us alive in the face of overwhelming odds." Ralcor grunted in approval. "I've heard tales of human warriors, how they faced the Zalvar horde when no one else would. Is it true that you destroyed your own colony to deny it to the enemy?" Kane nodded grimly. "We did what was necessary, and we're prepared to do it again." The room was silent for a moment, the council members absorbing the gravity of Kane's words. Finally, the Valora representative spoke, her voice softer now. "But at what cost, Captain? War is a path of destruction. Can you promise that humanity's methods will not lead us all to ruin?" Kane's eyes hardened. "War is always a path of destruction, but sometimes it is the only path that leads to survival. If we do not fight, we will be destroyed. If we do not adapt, we will be consumed. Humanity has faced extinction before, and we learned that survival often requires sacrifice." The council chamber was filled with murmurs as the representatives conferred with their respective governments, weighing their options. Finally, the Litherian spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of the decision they had reached. "Very well, Captain Kane. The Galactic Council authorizes the Terran Alliance to lead the defense against the Zeltraxians. But know this, we place our trust in you, and we expect you to bring us victory." Kane nodded, her expression unreadable. "You won't regret it. As she left the chamber, the council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had called upon humanity as a last resort, aware that they were unleashing a force unlike any other in the galaxy. The humans were indeed crazy. But in a war against an enemy like the Zeltraxians, perhaps that madness was exactly what they needed. The human fleet assembled at the edge of the nebula core, a ragtag collection of ships that seemed almost primitive compared to the sleek, advanced vessels of the other species. The aliens watched in disbelief as the humans prepared for battle. Their ships were reinforced with strange alloys, bristling with weapons that seemed outdated or bizarre by galactic standards. Captain Kane had assembled a team of the most brilliant, and some would say unhinged, military minds humanity had to offer. Her second-in-command, Commander Jax Mad Dog O'Neill, was a strategist known for his wild and often reckless ideas. The ship's engineer, Dr. Ilara Trent, had a reputation for creating weapons that defied logic and reason. And then there was Sergeant Leo Reaper Hayes, a soldier who had seen more battles than most would care to remember and had survived them all. As the Zeltraxian fleet approached, Captain Kane and her team began to implement their strategy, a strategy that none of the other species could comprehend. Instead of forming a defensive line, the human fleet scattered, spreading out across the battlefield in a seemingly chaotic pattern. The alien commanders watched in confusion, unable to predict the humans' next move. But that was the point. The humans didn't follow conventional tactics because they knew the Zeltraxians would be prepared for them. Instead, they relied on unpredictability, on creating chaos that would disrupt the enemy's plans. As the battle began, the humans employed tactics that defied reason. They launched decoys that emitted signals identical to their ships, confusing the Zeltraxian sensors. They used weapons that fired in erratic patterns, making it impossible for the enemy to anticipate where the next shot would land. And then there were the surprise attacks, small strike teams that boarded Zeltraxian ships in the midst of the battle, sabotaging their systems from within. The Zeltraxians, for all their intelligence, were not prepared for this level of unpredictability. Their logical minds could not adapt quickly enough to the humans' chaotic tactics. The tide of the battle began to turn in favor of the humans. As the war dragged on, the human fleet pushed deeper into Zeltraxian territory, using their unconventional tactics to devastating effect. But victory came at a high cost. The chaos that had given them an edge in battle also took its toll on the human forces. Captain Kane watched as her crew grew more exhausted with each passing day. The strain of constant battle, the need to remain unpredictable, was wearing them down. Commander O'Neill's wild strategies became more reckless, pushing the limits of what was possible and what was sane. Dr. Trent's inventions grew more dangerous, sometimes as much a threat to their own forces as to the enemy. And then there was Sergeant Hayes. The once unbreakable soldier was beginning to crack under the pressure. The things he had seen, the battles he had fought, were haunting him. He began to question the morality of their actions, wondering if they were becoming as monstrous as the enemy they were fighting. Despite the mounting pressure, Captain Kane knew they couldn't stop. The Zeltraxians were relentless, and any sign of weakness would be exploited. The only way to win was to continue their mad campaign, to push the limits of what was possible and hope that their enemies broke before they did. But deep down, Kane knew that there was a price to be paid for their methods. Humanity's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness, the willingness to embrace chaos, to defy logic, to do whatever it took to survive. It was what made them crazy in the eyes of the galaxy, but it was also what made them masters of war. The vastness of space was illuminated by the flickering light of distant stars, but in the sector where the final battle was about to take place, darkness reigned. The human fleet, battered and reduced to a fraction of its original size, hovered in formation, waiting for the inevitable clash. The Zeltraxian fleet, a looming shadow on the edge of the star system, began to advance, their massive dreadnoughts blotting out the stars. Inside the bridge of the Invictus, the flagship of the Terran fleet, Captain Aria Kane stood before the central holodisplay. Her face was illuminated by the cold blue glow of the tactical readouts, showing the overwhelming numbers of the Zeltraxians. Her crew moved around her with the precise, almost mechanical efficiency of soldiers who had long ago left fear behind. They were all veterans now, hardened by countless battles, but there was a tension in the air that spoke of the uncertainty of what was to come. "Status report," Kane ordered, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Commander Jax O'Neill, his once wild eyes now carrying the weight of too many losses, stepped forward. "All ships report ready, Captain, but we're down to 35% of our original strength. If this doesn't work—" Kane held up a hand, silencing him. "It will work, Jax. It has to." She turned to the holographic map, her mind running through the plan one last time. It was a plan born out of desperation, the kind of audacious gamble that only humans would consider. The Zeltraxians, for all their intelligence, could not conceive of a race that would willingly sacrifice itself for victory. That was the key to this final gambit. "Initiate Phase 1, Kane ordered. Throughout the fleet, the remaining human ships powered up their engines and began to accelerate directly towards the heart of the Zeltraxian formation. It was a suicidal charge, one that no other species in the galaxy would dare to attempt. But the humans were not like any other species. The Zeltraxian dreadnoughts responded with precise, devastating firepower. Ships were torn apart by energy beams and missiles, their debris scattering across the battlefield. But the human fleet did not waver. They pressed forward, closing the distance with a grim determination. "All units, prepare for Phase 2, Kane commanded, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. In the engineering bay, Dr. Elara Trent was overseeing the final preparations. Her hands moved with practiced speed as she and her team activated the self-destruct mechanisms embedded in the core of each ship. These were no ordinary bombs. They were designed to unleash a chain reaction that would amplify the power of the ship's reactor, turning it into a weapon of unimaginable destructive potential. "All systems green," Trent reported, her voice echoing through the comms. Kane nodded. "Begin Phase 2. All ships. Execute final maneuvers." As one, the human fleet split into smaller groups, each one targeting a different part of the Zeltraxian formation. The enemy, confused by the sudden change in tactics, struggled to adjust. It was exactly what Kane had counted on. One by one, the human ships began to detonate. Each explosion was a blinding flash of light, followed by a shockwave that tore through the Zeltraxian ships. The dreadnoughts, caught in the center of the blasts, began to buckle under the strain. For the first time in the war, the Zeltraxians found themselves on the defensive. On the bridge of the Invictus, Kane watched as the Zeltraxian formation began to crumble, but she knew it wasn't enough. The enemy was too vast, too powerful to be defeated by mere destruction alone. They needed a final blow, a strike that would shatter the Zeltraxians' will to fight. "Sergeant Hayes," Kane said, her voice resolute, "it's time." In a small strike ship that had been hiding among the debris, Sergeant Leo Hayes and his team prepared for the final phase of the mission. Their ship, equipped with advanced cloaking technology, had slipped past the Zeltraxian defenses and was now in position above the enemy's flagship, a massive vessel that was the nerve center of the entire fleet. "Copy that, Captain," Hayes replied, his voice steady despite the odds. "We're going in." The strike ship moved with precision, latching onto the hull of the Zeltraxian dreadnought. Hayes led his team through the breach, moving quickly and silently through the corridors. The interior of the ship was a labyrinth of alien technology, but Hayes had studied the schematics for weeks, memorizing every detail. They reached the command center without incident, the Zeltraxians unprepared for an assault within their own ship. Hayes placed the charges carefully, each one set to detonate in sequence, ensuring maximum damage. As he set the final charge, Hayes paused, his mind flashing back to the countless battles he had fought, the comrades he had lost. This was the end, he knew. There was no escape from what was to come. But he had made his peace with that long ago. "Charges set," Hayes reported. "Good luck, Captain." "You too, Leo," Kane replied, her voice betraying the slightest hint of emotion. "See you on the other side." Hayes activated the detonator and the charges went off in a blinding flash of light. The Zeltraxian flagship erupted from within, the explosions ripping through its core. The chain reaction spread to the other ships, tearing the heart out of the Zeltraxian fleet. On the bridge of the Invictus, Kane watched as the enemy formation collapsed. The Zeltraxians, without their command structure, began to retreat, their once invincible fleet reduced to wreckage. "We did it," O'Neill whispered, almost unable to believe what he was seeing. Kane didn't respond immediately. She stared at the holo display, watching as the remnants of her fleet regrouped, survivors from the most improbable victory the galaxy had ever seen. But her mind was on the cost. The lives lost, the ships destroyed, the madness they had embraced to achieve this victory. "All ships, return to base," she finally ordered, her voice heavy with exhaustion. As the Invictus turned away from the battlefield, Kane looked out at the stars. The war was over, but the galaxy would never forget what had happened here. Humanity had shown the galaxy why they were masters of war, but at a price that few could truly understand. Kane closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the lives lost pressing down on her. They had survived, but the cost of survival was something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. And as the stars began to fade into the distance, she knew that the galaxy too would carry the scars of this war for generations to come.